Hey everyone, welcome to this video. This is a video that I've been working on for, I guess a project I've been working on for quite some time now, and I'm really excited to kind of get into it. This will be a multiple part video, probably 2, maybe 3. I have so much footage and it really was a big project that it might be multiple videos. But with all my projects, just jumping right into it, I started with sketching it out, and this time I actually sketched out a stencil to kind of work from. Originally I had a very simple small sketch in my sketchbook of what I wanted to do for this Ent house, which the concept of was something that just exists in the world of the campaign that I'm running, and it's basically a Hobbit house that is a tree house, but it is in a very large tree Ent. This is a kind of a duo of characters in my campaign, and they are inseparable, essentially, considering one lives on the back of the other. So I wanted this build to look a little bit more whimsical. I wanted the house to be like, you know, kind of funky architecture, not perfect, and I kind of wanted it to look a little dilapidated because, you know, it sits in the boughs of a tree that walks around. So essentially what's happening here is it's kind of falling apart, but at the same time it's still working out. But once I got this drawn and cut out, I used it as a stencil and started to build, honestly, just kind of shot from the hip on this one, as far as the structure of it and putting it all together, which, you know, can work. I would have gone a lot faster if I actually, you know, drew it all out specifically, which I actually started to do, but then decided that I was just gonna kind of wing it, and it ended up working out really well, but took a little bit extra time. So using my hot wire cutting table, I cut all the wall thicknesses and then used the sketch stencil to basically just cut out all the walls from those pieces just with a razor knife. As you can see here, the front face of the house and the rear of the house are different sizes, which is just in order to lean into that more whimsical look. Kind of gives the roof a more interesting profile. Using that stencil, I ended up cutting out the door and then tracing it right onto the front of the house. I ended up cutting out the windows just right out of the walls on the 2 sides and the back as well. And as you can see, the door shape is also whimsical. And the other windows that I cut out on the sides are kind of a more square, but they're not perfectly square either. But using one of my borer tools, I cut out some circular windows on the front and back right at the peak of the walls there. This tool is fantastic. Honestly, I've talked about it in many videos, but it's seriously a really helpful tool. So check out the links in the description and you can pick up your own from Amazon. It also helps out the channel. After I got all the windows and doorway cut, I just glued it together with some hot glue, and I essentially had my simple structure going on here. Then it was time to work on the roof, and I used my hot wire cutter to cut some thin planks kind of to serve as the first layer of the roof. And then I also ended up cutting some kind of more square, long-shaped beams to work as the trim of the roof that would go all the way around it. So I just started assembling from there, and I kind of built like a real house almost, but, you know, not a real house at the same time. Just kind of framed it out so I could put the planks lay lengthwise across the house so I could ready them for putting shingles on later. I kind of cut these at varying widths and then gave them a wood texture, mostly because I wanted to have it, again, look dilapidated and kind of falling apart a little bit, so I knew I was going to have some wood exposed, so I just textured every single piece. But if you haven't seen it already, I recently released a techniques, tips, and tricks video on how I like to do my wood texture. I mean, you're watching it now, but there's a bit more to it than just this, so go check it out if you haven't. But yeah, I ended up also texturing all of the larger square beams as well. And then using some hot glue, I started to add all of the planks to create the first layer of the roof. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to do this step in this way, but again, I didn't know exactly where I'd be leaving exposed parts of the roof yet. I was still kind of brainstorming that idea, so I built it in this manner. If I had sketched it out previously, again, I could have just maybe done even one section, because I end up only exposing one small part of the roof because Most of it gets covered by moss later on, which you'll see in another video. As you can see, I actually ran this first layer of boards longer than the house. That way I would be able to cut an overhang on the front and backs of the house and kind of, again, lean into that more whimsical look. I then added the more beam style trim pieces, just kind of bent them into place and then cut them how they needed to be later on. These do wrap around, again, the bottom part of the roof as well. But very simple, just piecing it together one little strip of foam at a time. And it was at this point I realized that it was way too flimsy, and I took it all apart. Those middle beams right there ended up being way too flimsy, and the roof was just like folding in on itself, and I didn't think it was going to work in the long run. So I ended up making a stronger beam by just using the stencil of the front face of my house, and then used a big old thick fat triangle and glued it in the middle, and then started over. It really kind of sucked, but you know, it happens. But I ended up trimming out the rest of the house, and then I realized that, you know what, this actually needs a bottom, because like a floor, because it's going to be sitting up in a treehouse. It's not going to be sitting on the ground. So I just used one of those wall pieces and cut out a door, which ended up just getting wood texture on the bottom of it, just with a ballpoint pen and a wire brush, as opposed to doing individual planks. I then made some cute little window flower boxes on the 3 windows to add flowers in later. This was going to be a pretty highly detailed project. It's essentially a diorama, so yeah, I started adding details here and there, and I didn't stop with this and just kind of kept going and going until this project started taking weeks to complete. To clad the sides of the house, I decided they were going to be like wood panels. And to do that, I was doing kind of 2 different methods here. I did a kind of live edge horizontal plank like you see here, which I end up cutting very thin into planks with, again, that live edge just kind of gives it that more whimsical look. And then I did some more vertical, just straight strips on the kind of peak part of the front part of the house. These all got wood textures, and then starting from the bottom, I started to just hot glue them and slightly layer them over the piece below them, and then cutting them around the windows. I kind of trimmed the corners of the house. I wanted them to be like metal. I didn't want this whole thing to just be wood. Those end up changing to wood later on, but then I moved on to making shingles, and I wanted to do something a little different this time from the previous shingles that I've done. Again, I wanted these to be metal shingles because I was going to be coating them in moss later on, and I just wanted to do something different. So I cut them all out of chipboard, which I had never done before for roof shingles, and then I began to glue them all on piece by piece. Took a little while, but I am very pleased with the way they looked in the end. I wanted to add a little dormer, and I kind of tilted it on its side again to look like it's kind of falling apart and being jostled around up in the trees. And yeah, gave it a lot more character, to be honest with you, and I was very pleased with it. But in order to kind of clad the roof with the shingles, I started from the bottom and worked my way up and kind of gave them kind of funky spacing. All the shingles aren't the exact same size either, so yeah, gave it again a more whimsical look and a more kind of hand-built, not super concerned about my house, but more concerned about kind of the task at hand that we're trying to complete here. I'll talk more on that later in maybe the finale video of this series. After that was all completed, as you can see, I only left one small spot exposed, but then I capped it off with some more chipboard, and then to hide the seams on this and the side pieces, the vertical versions of this on the corners, 4 corners of the house, I covered with just some black construction paper to hide the seam. I really wanted there to be a kind of standout characteristic on this house, other than the fact that it's going to look really funky. So I built a really funky looking kind of stovepipe chimney, and I made this just out of foam. I didn't want to go too crazy with anything and try and locate some material. I just wanted to use what I had, so I took some 2-inch thick XPS foam, took my borer tool, and then cut out kind of different diameters, and then started to glue it together and assemble it. And it turned out to look really nice. I even carved the little cone-shaped cap out of XPS foam at the top. which apparently I actually did not film me doing that. So I added some kind of final details to the house, a little plate up there and a beam, and it was honestly almost done. It was just kind of building the door after that and then getting it ready for paint. The paint held off for a while because the next step was to make the tree ent, which something that was entirely new to me because I was going to sculpt it out of polymer clay, and that's actually what the next video is going to be, is me sculpting a tree ent out of clay. And I had a lot of fun doing it, I'm not gonna lie. It turned out awesome. The clay was very fun to work with, but so stay tuned for that video. I'm gonna release it here very soon, maybe next week. I'm not exactly sure yet, but it's done. It's just how often I want to release videos and finding time to edit these videos. So, but yeah, thank you so much for watching. Curious your thoughts on the kind of backstory of these two characters. I already have one written, but I'd be curious to kind of think what your thoughts are. What would a halfling, it's a halfling druid in my world, but it could be whatever you want. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think the purpose of a halfling living in a tree house in the boughs of a tree ent would be, and kind of their own little story. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. But thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe so you can know when the next videos in this kind of project are coming up. And yeah, thanks again. We'll see you in the next video.